So, good morning. Day 3, proactive approach training refresher course. So, learning objectives for today. We are not doing rapid trank. I'll just fast forward it a little bit. The rapid trank video, if you want to watch it, is on VA. So it's there if you ever need any answers for rapid trank. So we're not actually covering rapid trank today. We're going to do a little bit of seclusion theory and then we're going to talk about post-incident debrief. And I know that we've talked a little bit about debrief as we've gone on. Seclusion theory. So we're starting off with a knowledge check again, and this is to promote a bit of discussion. That's what we want, a bit of discussion based. So what can a seclusion suite be used for? Do you reckon it's A, B, C or D? D? Okay, do you all say D? It's A.
Definitely not B.
Definitely not B. Definitely not safe care. That word has gone.
I mean, so before we had bedrooms that were more able to give people a bit of space,
Yeah.
call it that area, it was used as a bit of a, not the actual seclusion room, but the area within the vicinity of the seclusion room was used as a de-stim place, somewhere you could sit and talk,
Yeah.
like safe care.
That's not considered a suite though, is it? The
But-
outside bit.
It's so the
It's
seclusion.
the area though, isn't it? It's the
Outside.
area. It's
That's
suite.
the suite.
Yeah, they call that
It
the
is, it's the seclusion suite. So in policy and code of practice it talks about the seclusion should only be used for seclusion purposes. However, this is the reason why we put this question up. We wanted it to elicit a little bit of discussion because let's say not all of our environments are
We've not got all little rooms in all buildings.
perfect. It's not a perfect environment, is it? The seclusion suite, it talks about it being used only for seclusion purposes. However, there are times when you can use it because it is the safest area to be used. It's that justified, proportionate, reasonable and
I
necessary.
mean, record it down, like you've used
Yeah.
that area because that's the only place you've got.
Therapeutic segregation, they usually
Yeah.
call it, don't
You can
Yeah.
assess for seclusion, can't you?
Absolutely, that's
And
what it's all about.
decide against
Yeah.
it.
If you are going to a seclusion suite, it should be with the intention that you are secluding somebody, but you can use it for assessment, and you can use it as a capable environment as well. So it's not somewhere that we should be using or storing things. Should be storing things there. Good morning, you okay? So, this is Sarah. Do you want to say good morning?
Do you want to say good morning?
Yeah. So it is for seclusion purposes, but this is what we were saying, it's about the discussion around it. So, why would we seclude a person? I mean, the first word should wipe out 2 of those answers completely. For what reason would we ever seclude a person?
Yeah.
See you, Andy?
Well, initially it's D, but I mean, you can, but you know, there's a risk to others as well. You know, you're going to be definitely using it for that, aren't you?
And again, it's a discussion base. What does it state in policy about seclusion? Why would we use it? Why would we initiate it?
To prevent immediate harm.
Because long-term management of risk is their segregation, don't they?
Okay.
The only difference is the short and long term, isn't it? The
Yeah.
seclusion is the short term management.
But it's whether it's the risk to others yourself, isn't it? It's mostly self. isn't it?
Okay.
But you're not supposed to seclude for risk yourself.
No.
So in policy, this is what it states, and this is what it breaks it down to in the definition. So the definition states that it is for risk to others. And again, we'll talk about that as we go through the PowerPoint. So what is seclusion? We've talked about this quite a lot, haven't we, even over the last couple of days, especially talking about the difference between seclusion, segregation. I know that we've got long-term seclusion, segregation. Is it class over there? Are they classing it as segregation with your gen? It's not being classed as seclusion, is it?
No, because I mean, when we've looked at the only The only difference is the long term and short term, and he's long term.
Yeah.
You've turned into SAG, haven't
It's
you?
So
turned
it
into
is-
segregation, hasn't it? But that's documented with CCGs and all
With
everybody else,
absolutely
everybody, isn't
Everybody.
it? So
yeah.
they're not using the term seclusion for
No.
him, are they now?
No, and
It's long-term segregation.
we're nursing him under all the segregation, all the segregation paperwork,
Yeah.
segregation policy.
Because
Yeah.
staff were saying it was kind of blurring the lines because it's not a segregation suite like we have on other units, but it's being used.
So everyone
created.
completely disagreed with it at first.
Okay.
But when you look, I mean, everyone still completely disagrees with it.
Okay.
However, when you look at like code of practice, the law, everything, it's all should, long-term segregation, long-term segregation,
Yeah.
should. So it's the only environment we've got.
Yeah.
We have no other.
Yeah, but it's all documented.
Yeah,
it is all
it's-
documented. It's not
yeah.
going under the radar.
No, not
So
at all.
I know that this has kind of been been a bit of a sticking point with people where they're trying to get their head around planned long-term emergency. So it is all documented. So this is what it says in the Mental Health Act. It says seclusion refers to the supervised confinement. You have to have eyes on somebody that's in seclusion. I'll talk about a situation that somebody was raised in training. So the supervised confinement and isolation of a patient away from other patients in an area from which that patient is prevented from leaving, where it is of immediate necessity for the purpose of the containment of severe behavioural disturbance which is likely to cause harm to others. Okay? So, again, it's that kind of period of assessment. If you're using it to seclude somebody because they are causing harm to themselves, by causing harm to themselves, they could be causing distress to others. So sometimes it's those kind of semantics of words.
It's repellent, yeah, it's
So I was questioning once because a patient had been self-harming, but it took 4 of you to take it off and he would kick and scream, so that was the
Yeah.
reason to seclude. And someone later down the week said you shouldn't seclude for the risk to self.
Yeah.
It clearly says he's, well, if he calmly let us take it off, that's fine, but he was kicking our asses really, so.
We've had a situation where a girl quite recently was stripping off, she was cutting herself, and she was doing it in such a way that they couldn't maintain her privacy, her dignity, and staff were saying, we're not allowed to take her to this segregation suite because she's harming herself, she's not harming others, but it was causing distress to other people. So it's, again, isn't that the better environment to manage her there and deal with it there, and we'll talk about whether you can shut the door.
Distress is harm to others, isn't it?
Of course it is. Of course it is. Psychological harm is as bad as physical harm.
Yeah.
So,
What you could say in the court of law, if it comes down, if you broke it all down and explain the scenario and say this is the best of what we had and it was the safest for all concerned, then that's what you're doing. And as long as it's done with the best intent
Yeah. best
possible.
interest, last resort,
Yeah.
it's all those kind of words that we mean. So again, people become very sort of tunnel vision with that, and I know that it's something that we should have discussions about. When it talks about the supervised confinement, you have to have eyeballs on that patient at all times. You're all familiar with what a seclusion suite looks like? Have you seen one, Hayley?
Yeah.
You know what they look like. I've had somebody say to me in training, why don't they have a doorbell? They don't need a doorbell. It's the supervised confinement. They are literally being watched at all times. Well, what if they need you? You're there. There's somebody there. Well, what if they're on the toilet? I said, well, you will go from that window to that window. We have to justify it under our freedom principles. You know, it's law, legislation. We have to watch them. Policy states that you should be able to see their head, hands and chest at all times. So we shouldn't be taking eyes off them. Somebody said, what if you're reading a book? We shouldn't be. It's the supervised confinement.
Sometimes when people are, especially Sandwich, I think we've got lights in there now, but if you've got a lamp out here, it's that thing you were saying before, you can't,
Yeah.
it's difficult to see, and if
Yeah.
it's pitch black and you've got a light here, you can't see anything.
Yeah.
I think they've got a little night light now.
Yeah. Right thing.
That was just a risk because you've got a lamp out there for the staff all night. You don't want to sit in the dark. or with the big lights on.
Yeah, but you should be able to see them, and I know that that is a difficult situation at times when the patients are under covers as well.
You used to always have that, at one point, you used to have like a dimmer switch, you could,
Dim it up and
I
down.
think
Do it up
we've
and
got
down
one
in
now, I don't think that
in
we've
the,
come across that before. Haven't we?
Yeah, I know that Greenway Seclusion Suite has just been updated. The criteria for seclusion suites are so tight. There's lots and lots of things. If you think about bright lights, lights being switched on throughout the night, it'd be cruel, wouldn't it, if you keep switching a light on and off?
you just want something subtle in there, but
Yeah.
enough so you can see
See what's
safely.
going on.
You'd have to have the big
not
light on
to
all
disturb
night.
too much.
Ken's escalating potential for getting CCTV in our seclusion suite.
That would be
So eight.
better.
So not to replace kind of level 3,
This
but
is
just to
additional
aid you as an
support.
additional.
Yeah.
That's good.
And the code of conduct actually says they must be within sight or sound. So there may be an occasion, our policy says level 3 within sight, but it could be there's one particular patient where it's causing more distress having somebody looking at them
Watching,
through
yeah.
the window. So it could be an MDT discussion to say we need to step outside of the trust policy for this, but we're still within the code of conduct, because the code of conduct actually, code of practice, sorry, says within sight or sound. It doesn't specify you've got to be within eyesight at all times, but you'd never just make that as a snap decision. That'd be a full MDT to ever step outside the policy, but it's just there to give you. So if you think of like Ashworth and things, where they've got people in longer term seclusion, and they've got a couple of seclusion suites with 1 or 2 members of staff manning them all. So yeah, the code of practice actually says sight or sound.
Which is good though, if you think about policies, guidance, and there are times when you need to step outside of policy. Because can you imagine having somebody staring at you for 24 hours of the day?
It's awful.
It must be
Especially if
absolutely.
you're paranoid and
Yeah.
stuff
Oh
like
God,
that.
yeah.
I mean, we watched a webinar from people that had been secluded, and they just said it is like torture having somebody watch you constantly. So I kind of like the fact that we are looking at a more person-centred approach
I
for
know
that.
people are unwell when they're in there, and
Yeah.
that's why they're in there, but it's
Right.
just...
And you've got
it
open
must
door
be right.
seclusion as well, you've got that as a possibility. If self-harming is a behaviour as well, you can have open door seclusion, it doesn't have to be shut them up behind the door for it to be seclusion.
No, not at all. So it does go on to say, if a patient is confined in any way that meets the definition on the previous slide, even if they have agreed to it or requested, they have been secluded. And the use of any local or alternative terms such as therapeutic isolation or the conditions of the immediate environment do not change the fact that the patient has been secluded. It is essential that they afforded the procedural safeguards of the Code of Conduct. And again, like Sarah was just saying, the Code of Conduct is something that we can step out of, but we've got to evidence a clear rationale for why we're doing it.
Yeah, over the years, it's been put down, well, they're not been secluded because the door's not shut. Yes, they are in seclusion because they're in the seclusion suite.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like, well, you go through the paperwork. you
If
do
they're not
that.
free to leave, they are being secluded. If they
Yeah.
are, if you are telling people with your voice to go back in there and sit down, they are being secluded. You can seclude somebody anywhere. So it must be, the transfer of the patient to the seclusion must only be done as last resort. We've said that so many times this week. Where there is immediate risk, again there's that thing, risk and harm, in the best interest of the patient and for the shortest time possible. What's the shortest time?
Depends what
How
the
long?
situation is.
30 seconds.
30 seconds?
1 second.
Yeah, do you know what? We've had people ring us up saying, tell me what the shortest time
You
is.
can't, you have to go
Well,
on
1 second is the
situation.
shortest measurable time you've got.
It's
So there you go, 1
situational.
second.
Situational
It is. What's it based on?
on the person that's in there
Yeah.
and how they're responding to you as a
What's the
staff member.
shortest time? It's when
And
When the risk ends. It's all about the risk. Staff want an actual time frame, Dan. They want, is it an hour? Is it 2 hours? Is it 20 minutes? Is it 72
So if
hours?
they calm after 5, they would go up to that 20 minutes.
So, sorry.
So if they were calm within 5, would they go up to the 20 minutes then, do you think?
It's anything is all about, everything we do is being constantly assessed. We're doing dynamic risk assessments and our written risk assessments, and we have our step down plans, but the minute they go in, they could be in there for an hour, but they could be in there for weeks or months. You know, it's for the shortest time when the risk depicts So all other interventions must be safely explored and clearly documented within the clinical records. It must reflect a balance between positive risk management, taking into account the impact of the restrictive practices used and ensuring patients and staff members are kept safe. Everybody's kept safe. We looked at different trusts where they didn't have seclusion suites and how they managed their patients, but they had other environments that they could use. We don't really have that many capable environments. So these are the key points for discussion. I'm going to break it down. I think it talks about, yes it does, it breaks it down into slides. So it is about a discussion now. So where can we seclude?
Anyway.
Anywhere. Yeah? Do we all agree?
Well, it's got to be a trust building, I suppose, hasn't it?
Yeah? Yeah, trust building. Good idea. So, in accordance with the Mental Health Code of Practice, it should only be, it says in the Mental Health Code of Practice, it should only be undertaken in a room or suite of rooms that have been specifically designed and designated for the purpose of seclusion and which serves no other function on the ward. Okay? But we've already said you could seclude anywhere. Could you seclude me in this room?
Yeah.
How?
I'm not
What
letting you
else?
Not letting me out. Simple as. What would you have to consider if you're secluding me in this room?
the environment.
Yeah? The risk? What harm I could do to myself? But if I'm saying to you, open that door, or you're barricading that door and I can't get out, then I am being secluded. We have had a patient who had an electric wheelchair, and she was using her wheelchair to assault people. She was literally ramming it into people. So the staff took the battery out of the wheelchair. It was like, you are secluding her because she's not free to leave. She couldn't get anywhere. So they were saying, well, what can we do then? Because she's harming us. She's harming other people quite badly. So it was a case of we have to do the least restrictive thing. We take away the electric wheelchair and give her a manual wheelchair so she's still free to leave. But staff didn't think that that was seclusion because she was in the middle of a room with doors open. She wasn't free to leave. The use of non-designated rooms to seclude a person is in breach of the Mental Health Code of Practice and must only be utilised as an emergency measure. We shouldn't be using seclusion rooms for, I don't know, activities. We shouldn't be using it for day-to-day stuff. But if you are using it to manage the situation, and it is the safest place to do it, then you can use that room. So, in exceptional circumstances, if we do seclude somebody in a non-designated room, there will be a process to follow. It's all on System 1 now, and staff that have used it said it's a lot easier to use because it needs escalating. So the minute we do it, we need to escalate it to the nurse in charge or the RC, responsible clinician, and then through the senior leadership team, and there will be a process that gets followed. So in working hours, outside of working hours. I have been told that it's a lot easier to use now rather than the paper bundles. I know that we had a power outage not that long ago and everybody was panicking because we had to go back to paper bundles. But this is a far easier process to follow. So who can we seclude? It's not a trick question. Can we exclude anybody? Think about Shaney Lewis. What went wrong with Shaney? Because he was informal. Can we seclude informal patients?
You'd have to assess for 5 4, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
If you were gonna do it.
So,
But
nurses holding power? You never used it, Dan?
I think we said we were going to once because the doctor wasn't going to be there, but we got there. and
Yeah.
I've used it.
Have you?
I've used
You have you? Okay. So why would you use 5 4 nurses in holding power then?
Stop people from leaving.
Because we assessed the risk of somebody wanting to go and felt it was not in their best interest at the time, and the discussion with the
So it's all again
decided to
that risk
keep
and
them
harm
until they
stuff.
recover.
So informal patients, we do have frameworks, legal frameworks that we could justify why we have detained that person. So there is the ability to hold on to somebody if we think that it's too risky. Who else can we seclude? What about dolls patients? Can we seclude dolls patients? What do you think?
I'm going to say yes if it's for safety, emergency.
Okay. Again, you would have to use some other legal framework, so maybe 5.2s or 5.4s, because dolls is about that individual being a risk to themselves. So then you've got to justify, but if they are a risk of harm to others, then you would use one of your frameworks to detain that person and then escalate it to an RC, who would then make an assessment as to whether that person would come off dolls and go on to a mental health section. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, but if you've got a justification for why you are secluding that person, it's the same thing, proportionate, reasonable, necessary justification. You wouldn't say, we can't seclude this person because they're on the dolls. Can we seclude visitors?
Depends on where. Citizen arrest. Yeah, if you're kicking out.
There is always a framework that we can use.
I'm not going to let them hurt me or my
No,
colleagues.
exactly.
Absolutely
There
not.
is a framework that you can use somewhere, a legal framework, to safeguard
Well,
yourselves and others.
Self-defence, isn't it?
Yeah, reasonable force. Section 3 of the Criminal Law Act, I think. It should only be used in hospitals and relations to patients detained under the Act. And it says if an emergency situation arises involving an informal patient, seclusion is necessary to prevent harm to others, then an assessment for emergency application for detention under the Act should be undertaken immediately. So you've already said you've used your powers. You have to be a registered mental health nurse or a learning disability nurse to use those powers. So our physical health nurses that work in our team, they can't use that. They don't have that additional authority. So when, I don't know, we've had staff saying, people say, we're not real nurses, and it's like, well, you have more powers than general trained nurses because you have that framework to use. Self-harming, so we've talked about that, managing self-harm behaviours. It must be the least restrictive in the shortest time possible. If somebody is harming themselves, that is harmful to others. You know, watching somebody putting a ligature around or cutting themselves, gouging at themselves, you can justify why you would manage that person, but you wouldn't necessarily put them in the room and shut the door and leave them in the room self-harming. You would have to manage the risk. It's the same as what you would do on the ward, but we're affording that suite to be used for the privacy and dignity aspect for that individual. Do we agree? It's just people say you can't do that because you've said to me, you've already had somebody saying you're not allowed to seclude somebody.
Well, we were going into it when the walk was everywhere. It was just dangerous.
Yeah.
Dangerous to 4 or 5 staff. It needs to go to seclusion overnight. They can do it in the morning. It's
Yeah.
the safest place to do it. It's not, this isn't it. And then all they came back was somebody reviewing it, self-harm. Should leave for self-harm. Like, no, read it, fool.
And then, yeah,
Read it.
put
Get
the
the
context into it. You
It's
read
not
the
that it's-
context. Don't just look at the behaviour, look at the context
That's
around
the thing,
it.
yeah, to think of the safety. If the staff
Yeah.
had to keep going in to do that all night, it was all 4 nights.
Well, you've got risk to others, haven't
Risk
you?
to staff slipping, it's
Of course,
like a slip
that's
slide.
harm.
But then somebody, people upstairs, self-harm, seclusion area. Fuck doing it. He
Yeah.
sits upstairs looking at cameras, come down
Have a
and
look.
see how we feel in that moment.
Yeah. Look at the whole story as well. Right.
You've assessed it at that
But
point.
where
and you've
you
felt-
scrutinise our people at the other end of cameras, so that's a job, isn't it?
Well, the cameras as well, when we've talked about the cameras, they're not a fail-safe safeguard, are they? Because they show body language, but they don't show you the context behind them as well.
Well, to be fair, this was in a patient's room, so there's
Yeah, there's no
camera
cameras
anywhere.
there
Yeah, I
anyway.
was justified with my decision.
How would you feel about cameras being in the seclusion rooms then?
Oh, there is one in the exclusion room, yeah.
In the actual suite where we could use a camera to watch a patient?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you can actually say, this is the harm that's
Yeah.
causing to others. I just wish all of our units have cameras, but they don't, because we have to put in place we have to justify it massively as to why we're stripping back somebody else's liberty. Yet we live in a CCTV world. We live in a world where we're
Most
constantly
surveilled
on
country,
camera.
aren't we? The most surveilled
Yeah, I
country.
think so. Yeah. So.
And we're getting AI cameras as well.
Yeah. Is that just, yeah. So it says, where the detained patient poses a risk of self-harm as well as harm to others, it should only be used when professionals involved are satisfied that the need to protect other people outweighs any increased risk to the patients. That's what you were just saying.
Yeah, the room was safer, he had less things to
Well, that's it, you've got
harm
obstacles
himself
in the
with.
bedroom, haven't you?
We asked him to put the ventilator clothes on, which he did. Didn't they?
Yeah.
It's safer over that.
Again,
And the staff, it's safe for the staff.
it's those words, isn't it? You are not allowed to use a seclusion.
I think we might update it to the self-harm, and it's just, it did annoy me, it really did annoy me. Right.
I think half the time they forget, if they took themselves back out of it and looked at the bigger picture and then put themselves in the
Annoyed me,
situation that you were in, they would think, oh God, what would I do in this situation? And they would probably react the same way because they
But they're not criticising the data. It's really annoying.
yeah, well, they're
Context.
not in the
Context
here
is
and now,
everything.
are they?
As long as you could stand up
Of course, I'll do it again.
and stand up and justify your actions. And let's be honest though, we have these processes because it's all about due diligence and we want people to be able to say, hang on a minute, and question it, because what we don't want is anywhere
Yeah,
we've had scandals.
Yeah.
So did you watch the Edenfield
I suppose,
scandal?
yeah, people do, it's right for people to question it.
Yeah, it
I
should
suppose
be.
it's a bit annoying when I've made the right decision.
Yeah, I get that. But as long as you know in your heart of
Yeah, I
heart
do,
that
I
you've
do,
done the
yeah,
right
yeah.
thing. So we should be able to question things.
Yeah.
Did you watch the Edenfield scandal? Where the young
The
girl was
programme?
on the floor? Yeah.
Pinching and stuff.
Yeah, well, no, the Edenfields was the down the road in Greater Manchester. She was a young girl.
No, the video, they're pinching it.
Oh.
Show that flash explosion.
The guy.
Well, this was the one where they had the managers meeting in the morning and said, right, we've all had enough of her, we're all tired. She's going into seclusion. And she was saying to the staff, why? What? Tell me why. Why are you taking us to seclusion? Because we are. But if that's what the managers are doing from the, from the top, it's going to cascade down. They literally, 7 of them went in and said, you are going into seclusion. They could never justify their actions because she was saying, I'm not doing anything. What am I doing?
But if
Tell
you
me
even give
what
the
I'm
option
doing.
to like, let's walk there.
Let's walk
It
there.
was
They
just
just
like,
put hands
I
on
don't
her.
know, yeah.
But she was saying to them, please tell me what
Yeah.
I've done wrong. Tell me what I've done wrong and then I'll begin to understand why you're putting me in there. And they were saying, we've just had enough of you. You could never justify your actions in a court. How could you justify
Oh,
that you're
but they
taking
all
away
got
somebody's
But
scrubbed.
that's
liberty?
like, I know a little bit where she's now gone.
Oh dear.
Yeah, and like it's so traumatised by that
Oh,
whole
that's
experience.
right, yes.
Exactly, so it's like the people who are now dealing with her, the managing her, it's just,
Can you
Maybe
imagine
a
though,
job
she's a
something
young
to do.
girl,
Yeah.
she's on a mattress on the floor and you've got 7 people coming in saying, right, we're going
and
to
because
put
it's such a
hands on
high
her.
profile case now as well, it's under the microscope with CQC and everyone
But
else.
it should be.
And yeah,
It should
but
be.
it shouldn't get to that point, should it?
Yeah.
Um,
And I think that's why we feel like sometimes that we are being, hang on a minute, why did you make that decision? Scrutinised. But it's just another safeguard, it's just another process. Because if that was my daughter, I'd want to know why too.
But in
So
that
at least
case,
we
it's
can
got to
answer
be
it.
reviewed. There's got to be
Yeah.
like, what was the rationale for
Yeah,
the decision?
exactly.
There, all right, fine.
Did
Yeah.
you
Well, that's the manager,
give
didn't
any
it?
other
Yeah, not just
choices
looking- not
of
just
what you
looking.
should- What you should
Seclusion, self-harm.
It was
solid,
it
like, it should be-
I'd heard.
You've got to review it.
Yeah.
I'd just heard from another staff member that another staff member disagreed with it, but then that staff member wouldn't tell me who it was. It was all
Yeah.
it was unofficial.
And that's why we should have debriefs. Where we can all get together
It's like,
and
well, tell
say-
me who it is. I'll have a word. I'll speak to them. I know I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to beat them up. Just want to
Yeah,
have a discussion with them why they.
yeah.
Yeah.
But then you can understand somebody else's thoughts on it and why, because if you haven't got the team decision
Yes, they
to
didn't have.
do this, it's not going to work properly and safely, and people are just going to be, well, I'm not getting involved
It
in
was
that.
somebody's
Yeah.
opinion. It wasn't an official review. It was somebody's
That duty
opinion.
of
Yeah.
conduct should be a
And
trial.
then if we had the debrief afterwards though,
It wasn't. It
from
was
that
somebody,
incident.
somebody from another ward there. Oh, I
Yeah.
wouldn't do that. You went
I
there.
know. So, what
yeah,
does it
that's-
state in policy? Who can authorise seclusion?
Nursing charge.
Nurse in charge? Yeah? Who else?
RC.
So it talks about the senior nurse of the ward and the RC, or responsible clinician, psychiatrist. Senior nurse of the ward. So you might have a clinical lead on duty and you might have a staff nurse on duty. If the clinical lead is on their break,
It's you're
the nurse in charge is the nurse in charge, okay? We've had somebody saying, well, I'm not doing it because she's the nurse in charge. But she's in Sainsbury's. You know, you are the nurse in charge. We had an incident. It was an incident that had gone on with two patients. One patient was attacking another patient. It was two clinical support workers that intervened. They pulled their alarms. It was quite a severe attack on the other patient. They pulled their alarms and nobody responded. They felt it was safer to take this patient that was attacking others away into the seclusion room. They locked the door because nobody was still coming from their alarms. And then they ran down to the MDT meeting and said to the clinical lead on duty, we've had this incident, this patient's attacking everybody, they've hurt one of the other patients really quite badly. And that clinical lead said to the two clinical support workers, how dare you put a patient in seclusion? How dare you, it's not your role, it's not your responsibility.
I should have responded to the alarm.
And that's what she said. She said, we've got a patient severely attacking another patient and we're leaving our other observation points to deal with the situation. We pulled our alarm and we felt that we had to put this person there so one person can watch them and the other person can run and get help. There was no other choice. I spoke to the clinical lead and I said to her, when you got there and you saw the patient in seclusion and you saw what had happened to the other patient, did you not agree that that person should have been in seclusion? And she said, oh, definitely.
They've taken that literally, haven't they?
Literally. It's semantics of words. So, what it would be your decision to go to that door and say, yes, this is seclusion, or no, this isn't. But I just thought that was it's kind of alienates teams, doesn't it? It splits and divides teams because it is a teamwork. Although it says the senior nurse of the ward, they are the ones that will start the paperwork, okay? I kind of think that they did the best dynamic risk assessment faced with the situation that they had at the time.
And I bet they did all the observations while the person's in there.
Oh
as well.
gosh, they
So
followed
can
all the
pass it on to
protocol, the safety.
Yeah,
You know, but you've got a patient then that's been injured and one that needs first aid, and then you've got somebody that needs observations, and to manage that situation safely, they did what they could with what they were faced with. A clinical support worker would never be able to initiate seclusion paperwork.
They just diffused the situation and separated two people from harming each other further, haven't they? Like,
Yeah,
like, you know,
but one was
Never seen
distressed.
anyone got conversation.
One was distressed crying because there was a huge fight going on. So there was lots of harm going on there. So there was harm to staff, harm to patients, psychological harm, there was trauma. And I just think we should be congratulating people for saying, this is what's happened, well done. Because, but
yeah, under the
it's the
circumstances,
words.
he managed to
Literally.
do well.
You manage the situation of what conditions.
Had she have got there and had said it wasn't seclusion, then there might have been a process then to say you've not followed, you know, a safe
But they shouldn't
protocol
get stick to
avoid-"
beat people with, though, should it? Like,
You know, it just split the team.
Yeah.
It divided the team, especially when it definitely was seclusion and they agreed.
You might have problems then with the junior staff, them not wanting to make decisions.
And that's
Well,
what
not-
I said.
Yeah.
I mean, our clinical support workers are paid a band 3 as well. They're not paid a band 1 or 2, which they are in some trusts, because it does give them
They can
professional
work
autonomy.
unsupervised.
Yeah, they're given quite a lot of professional autonomy, and it is quite a responsible role. If you think about watching somebody on obs all the time, they're constantly doing dynamic risk assessments of the level of risk and harm. So yeah, I just kind of use that as an example. I think it's quite sad really that you would have somebody, like you say, using that stick to kind of beat you with. So, but also, yeah, the psychiatrist. So we have a review process. Again, it's all on system 1. The person that has said this is seclusion, so if Dan puts a patient in seclusion, the nurse review, ideally, the next nurse review would be somebody independent. So it's somebody else. So I'll show you what it looks like on system 1.
Oh, it's not bad fun, is it?
No,
really
it's
now?
good. Have you used it, Jess?
Yeah.
You use it a lot. How do you find it as a system?
I really like it.
You like it?
I
Yeah?
really
Is it
like
easy?
It is easy, yeah, and it just because like you do one thing and it moves on to the
Yeah,
next.
well,
and
that's
you do
it.
that
It
thing,
clicks
and
in,
it
it
moves on to
completes.
that.
In the paperwork, you were like, right,
yeah,
well,
and it's
it's already
everywhere.
right, and it's like, whereas this, it allows you to do a sequence, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I really like it.
So that's it though, there straight away it gives you a full pathway and you know what's coming next and you know your timings, don't you? So I'm yet to meet somebody that says they don't like it.
No, everyone on the world says that it's so much better. And we still sometimes like would maybe get out of the paper checklist just so we've got it around.
It's only a belt and braces
Exactly,
approach.
yeah,
It's only a
yeah.
belt and braces
But in
approach.
terms of actually making sure everything is done, it's just so much easier.
I don't think we realised how much we rely on it now until all the systems went down and then we were going back to the paper bundles and
Yeah.
photocopying things. Paper things can go missing, can't they?
Yeah, well that was it. At the end of the seclusion, and you're trying to go around and find everything because you didn't upload it till it was complete, and it was, yeah, it was just a mess, wasn't it?
So I like it that way. Anytime we've got somebody in seclusion, they can be in level 3 or level 4. You can be within arm's reach depending on the risk. If you think about if somebody's in there and displaying self-harming behaviours, we should be covering all of their general day-to-day stuff, all of their needs. It's a really traumatic thing. If they haven't got any previous trauma, what we don't want to do is create a new trauma. I've had somebody say to me, we had somebody in seclusion that wanted to pray. And I was like, okay. And they were saying that, but they actually wanted to pray whilst they were in seclusion. And I said that we should be letting them pray. I said, and if they are praying and they pray, what you need to do is find out about their culture and where they need to pray. Is it a particular direction? Some people have to pray to, north, east, south, west. Find out where it is. And they said, and how do we do that? Get a compass. Get one off your phone. You can justify taking your phone onto a ward if you can say, this is what we're doing it for. We shouldn't be overthinking their care needs whilst they're in seclusion. Do they need anti-ligature clothing? Do they have glasses, hearing aids? Do we take them off if there's no risk? Because everything used to come off people.
Yeah.
Shoes, shoelaces, glasses, hearing aids. I've seen it where patients have had pens and papers taken off them when they use that to communicate. If you're taking somebody's glasses off them, you're stripping away another liberty, unless it's a risk. I know we had a gent that kept going into the seclusion suite who wore glasses, never did anything with his glasses, and then one day took them off and started gouging his arm. You might have to look at that next time as a risk factor, but don't automatically take them away. What about dietary needs? What can they have? Food, fluids, in seclusion. It used to say finger food, yeah? It's not said that for a long time
I
now.
suppose that's down to what they're doing at the time, and now if
Risk, isn't it?
somebody's being risky with a knife and fork,
Yeah.
plastic or whatever, then you would have to use the safety stuff.
It's, again, still staff are still thinking that we can only use finger foods. And people say, well, you would never give a patient a hot cup of tea. Our patient that was in seclusion for a long time loved his tea, loved it. He would never have thrown it away, never thrown it over you, because he loved it. But we would make it like a cup of tea. And it was all based on risk. If he was going to throw it, then we might have had to look at that and think, we might need to change the temperature. So any time they go into seclusion, there'll be a care plan for covering their needs. Don't change what they would do out of the ordinary. The seclusion policy is about 64 pages long now. Talks about activities. I can't imagine how mind-numbing it must be to be in a room this big with nothing to do for 24 hours.
I remember playing, was it on the window playing Hangman?
Yeah.
You had a bit
we used
of
to play.
markets or
Yeah.
Hangman or like Noughts and
Noughts and crosses.
Yeah.
We ended up having, window
Hangman's not the best
paints.
for the ligature risk, is it? I suppose.
So she used to point. She used to point on the opposite side where she wanted you to put
That's a good
her.
idea, isn't
It's
it?
really good. Yeah, but you do it on the outside, and then obviously they just point.
It'd be better seen, isn't it? But now it's like a virtual
I
screen on,
concept-
a screen that's.
Yeah. Do you know what?
There's a
Sometimes
screen like that in there for them.
Yeah.
Just to make it
You've
a bit
got one
silly.
you've got one in Moorside.
Projector.
No, projector. They can
Good
have
idea.
telly on the wall.
Good idea.
If you could
You've got one.
safely put
You've got
them.
one. Yeah.
That'd be a good idea.
In
wouldn't it?
Moorside.
Have a telly there.
And there's
Oh, I like it, Dan.
You
Put
can
it
put the
forward as
radio
a
on.
suggestion.
The TV only got like a glass, like a perspex box that you can, like a touch screen. So
There
when
must
they're,
be.
when they're in there, we can,
Well,
You can do
be
different
deprived
things.
of everything, shouldn't they? You know.
no, I think it's a really good idea. You can keep them entertained for,
We had it.
And sitting with a teeny little laptop screen on that time shelf
Yeah,
outside.
I think that's a really good idea, Dan. I think, yeah, you need to take that forward as your idea. We had a gent who was a personal trainer, and he said physical health and mental health were
Well,
like
Brendan, yeah.
massively balanced for him.
There was
So like,
really good living will or whatever it was. It was really
yeah,
good,
he
wasn't
wrote a very, very in-depth,
Advanced statement.
advanced statement, didn't he, about how he needs to be looked after when he's unwell. But I
was reading
contacted.
about his diet thinking, you don't provide that,
Yeah,
you don't
but we
provide
should
any of
do
this. None of
Should
it.
we
So, is that who was with us?
No.
We've had a couple, so we've had a
You
couple.
wanted all these fruits and veg, thinking.
Yeah,
Dead sad.
should be doing it.
But
We
you
should
get
be
the
doing it.
tinfoil food, mate.
I know.
If you're getting fruit,
Well,
that's the
Yeah,
only
yeah,
thing you
yeah.
can get. But
We did the best we got.
not
I-
veggies and stuff.
I contacted my gym and said, have you got any gym activities that we can do without any equipment? So send me like a list of, so I was like forwarding it to staff.
Pilates,
Yeah, there's loads of people, if they don't, that's not their norm of
What's
going
it
to
called?
the gym.
Calisthenics?
Yeah,
Body weight?
do it. But it's again giving printed sheets of ideas. I think we need to create folders, don't we, of ideas for people to maintain a day-to-day balance.
Is exercise not honing the skills?
No, you just.
Mm.
No.
That's his norm. We're being person-centred, aren't we, Jess?
Making him stronger though.
We're being
But
person-centred.
we're not allowed to make them stronger and more skillful.
Well, that's
Yeah.
more of your weights and everything, isn't it?
Makes you more powerful though.
Yeah. But
Not
he
for
said
that
though,
knockout blow.
in his advanced statement,
Oh,
he
it
said,
does.
when I become mentally unwell, my physical health declines. And then when I'm mentally well, I'm really frustrated that my physical health has declined. So for him, it was that balance of staying well. It was something he valued massively, and we should be looking at what people value. We've already said what we value, so it should be the same for them. Yeah?
I suppose one thing we should do is measure the somebody walk around the seclusion room, how many steps it takes, average steps it takes to walk around. So if somebody's like does steps on a daily basis, you can, we can work out how many laps they need to
You
do
could probably
to
give
do.
them a safe pedometer, couldn't you?
Yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah.
Very small, aren't we?
Again, if there's not a risk and they're not going to swallow it,
You've got to get the
or
old school ones that are just momentum as well, not
Yeah.
battery, so it might work.
yeah, I just think we need to get better. When the new policy came out with all the activity ideas in it, people were saying, "Oh my God, that's ridiculous! Like doing activities." For us, we've had patients with ball pools in there. We had one girl with
Projector with a Wii and a
Yeah.
control to keep it.
yeah. There's loads of things we can do. So the minute anybody goes
I'll
into
never want to come out
seclusion,
now.
you're
I want to
going
go
to be
into seclusion
thinking,
this weekend.
I want to come up with
You do
ideas.
get patients that want to go in there, don't you?
I know.
Can I go in there?
Because, do you know what? If we had other places in our environments where they could go, where they could have the lighting, the stimulus, like the shut the world out, it would be a better environment. Our environments, whilst what we say on our side of the trust, they're all purpose built and they've got their own bathrooms and all the rest of it, they're not perfect.
No.
We can have planned it for CC to just use the sofa area when things
Yeah.
are getting too much on the main wall.
Yeah, it's
don't
like
we?
care plan, it's documented. So we've got a seclusion plan. The minute we get a patient into seclusion, we have to have a plan to get them out. Don't overthink step down plans. It should be, you know, put them in there, discuss maybe opening the door, discuss maybe using the outside area. It doesn't have to be very complex. I know they tend to be complex, but everything that that patient needs should be captured in that care plan. Clothing risks, bedding risks, family and carer contact. If you've got somebody that's very autistic and they speak to their nana at 3 o'clock on the Friday, we should be facilitating that because it would make it worse for them.
Helps them to recover quicker, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Get 'em out.
Yeah. So everything we have is just a statement of clinical needs and how we're going to meet them, and we should be evidencing what de-escalation we're using. Distractions are great de-escalation, isn't it? So play hanging on. Go and get some. Get them out your petty cash if you still get them.
Yeah, I was
The
gonna say, you can always get that.
class markers.
Have you got fruit and
Yeah, you've got glass,
Veg.
haven't you, on your.
Yeah, and I was thinking yesterday, because we normally write all over the glass at Christmas, you know, and do like on the windows.
You can do it on a pen and paper, can't you? And you can just put the paper to them.
But we haven't done it this year, I don't know why we haven't done it.
Oh, well.
Painting.
Glass painting.
We already had some.
Yeah. So, what time is it now? 10:05. Post-incident support and debrief. We'll do this and then we'll stop for a break. You all okay? Yeah? We've spoken about this quite a lot this week. Like you said about your incident where somebody was saying you'd heard whispers that, oh, I don't agree with that. If we have a debrief after that situation, everybody's opinion should be valued, but we should all talk about it so we can put a little bit more context to it. So it's about understanding. We should all be able to say how we feel. The one thing that I will say is, remember when we watched that video about our brains, we have that fight, flight, freeze. The Queen used to say recollections will vary. So having a good debrief is a good way to talk about what happens. There is the informal debrief that we have on Datix and formal debrief. We've been quite good about capturing the informal stuff for years. The informal stuff is for years. It's the formal stuff that we need to get better at. So informal stuff talks about where there has been physical restrictive interventions, incidents resulting in non-physical restrictive interventions, and formal where it talks about incidents involving prone restraint or rapid trank and or harm. You can't tell somebody else they haven't been harmed. I know that people have witnessed incidents and been psychologically harmed. And that's not just us, that's other patients, everybody else. So if you feel harmed, you should be asking for a formal debrief. We always remember our worst days at work, don't we? And this is why we are having staff diagnosed with PTSD and complex traumas. This is why we have staff with compassion fatigue, because we're kind of running out of steam. We need to get better at it, but we need to take ownership. People are coming on this course saying, well, I was involved in an incident and nobody asked me. No, you need to be asking for this, but we are getting better. It's a little bit repetitive, so for both of them, it would be everybody involved in the incident, anybody that's witnessed it, heard it, anybody that was impacted by it. So this one talks about senior nurse, would talk about the informal stuff. Somebody doing a Datix captures the informal stuff because it will ask you what happened. Physical first aid was given, psychological first aid. So that's already kind of captured on our Datix, isn't it? Cold compress applied, advised to go to A&E for whatever reason. But the formal stuff should be led by psychologist, modern matron or senior clinical manager. and it should be organised within 1 week. Now, we've had a situation where a debrief happened. We've had a couple of debriefs. So I'll use an example where we had a cardiac arrest. And they held a debrief, but a bank staff wasn't involved. And also another unit member of staff was responding, senior member of staff from another unit. She witnessed the compressions of the cardiac arrest. She wasn't invited either because they said, well, you're experienced. You know, people have been doing this job for years. She said, well, I've never seen a cardiac arrest. I should have been involved in that debrief. And I get that that's hard to get everybody in a room. COVID has taught us we can do Teams meetings. Even if we're contacting somebody by phone, I could ring up and say, Dan, I know you're on annual leave this week, but you were involved in this horrendous incident. You've got the option of joining us via Teams, or do you want to tell over the phone what happened, your perspective, or do you want to come in and be involved in this meeting? We should be involving people. And it might be that we have to do it as a jigsaw and then knit it together at the end, but everybody's opinion should be included, okay? Because you might have a different perspective to somebody else. Does that kind of make sense? It's never about blame. It should never be about blame. It's only ever about what could we learn from this incident. And there should be some learning. In the situation with the cardiac arrest, one member of staff didn't have an alarm. Another member of staff didn't have any keys. So one couldn't raise the alarm and one couldn't get the equipment, the defib. It's not good, is it? So that was part of the learning. It shouldn't be about finger pointing, but we have to learn from this event. So it should always be somewhere private. It shouldn't be just done, you know, in the staff room in front of people. You should be afforded privacy. The informal stuff we're pretty good at doing, aren't we? Are you okay? Do you need some first aid? Do you need to go for a walk? Do you need to walk it off? And the formal stuff, again, is within a week and following completion of the datix. It shouldn't be about a blame. It should be about learning, and everybody should contribute. Contribution should be valued. Everybody else will maybe have a different perspective of what they think happened, and if you get some of the details slightly wrong, it's because what you remember, okay? We shouldn't be saying, no, that's not right, that didn't happen. We should be just listening to everybody's story and then figuring it out. There should be key learning points, and then from that key learning point, they should identify what we need to do going forwards. Going forwards from the cardiac arrest situation, we realised that staff were regularly being expected to work without keys and alarms. How can you keep people safe without keys and alarms?
It's only just getting better now, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's getting better because people are now escalating it and reporting it. For years, the data, or the safety data, didn't back up that staff didn't have keys and alarms. They didn't report it.
So is that on, that won't be happening on the more secure wards?
No,
That'll be happening on
doesn't
the
happen.
secure.
It tended to be, if I'm really honest, it tended to be Mulberry and Silk.
I was
That's sat in the,
going to say when I've been on Mulberry.
it's like the staff room and so they could have a key to sign staff and go, oh, I've got one, so no, I'll sit here getting paid, drinking coffee, so you get me on that.
Yeah.
But the other people haven't got the balls to say that. And
But
they
we
just,
should be
they
able
will just
to
wander around the
down.
ward without keys
You
and
can't
stuff.
walk around the ward because what happens if
I'm
it
very-
actually getting somewhere?
Exactly, well I just said I'll sit to getting paid, so you find me a key then, so
Well, can you
I'm
imagine?
quite happy to,
Can you imagine if
quite happy.
if you worked in the building trade and you rocked up for work and you didn't have any protective equipment and they said go up that scaffolding, but we haven't got any like safety rails around the edge, you'd be all right. You wouldn't do it. We shouldn't be doing it at work either. The alarms, I've had somebody saying I don't need an alarm.
Yeah, Roy doesn't need an alarm there, they seem to be quite hard these estates, lads.
We've all got alarms.
And so no, it's not about you needing an alarm, it's how I have to help you.
Yeah.
How do I have to help you?
Yeah, but if you go into a room and you've got somebody that's collapsed, you need to get help
Yeah.
quickly. It's not just about you, it's about other people as well, and that's what it's about. So that learning from that incident, straight away that escalated straight to the top, because you're talking about, because you know we have our categories, don't we? B, C, D, E. Anything that's B and above goes on to like PSIF, the Patient Safety Information Response Framework, and they looked at that and said, you need to get more alarms. You need to get, so it was literally 20 alarms, get a tracker, and that's what it's, when you say other units have got trackers and some
Yeah.
units haven't, so they're trying to
They
implement that
all
across
need
all
them, don't
wards.
they?
So we've never run out of keys. right?
No.
We've just
No,
got keys
it
and
doesn't
trackers.
happen.
No.
It doesn't happen, but it did happen there, and that was part of staff saying, how am I expected to get a defib if I can't open the
So
door?
I used to be really good at like a Mulberry. I'd collar one of the night staff. I'd make sure I was first to collar the night staff coming through the door
Yeah,
to get their keys.
yeah, that's bad,
Yeah,
isn't
but
it?
that is bad because
And making
you know,
sure I was first as well.
But Dan, if my mum is on a floor and you're doing CPR and you can't get the
Yeah,
equipment
yeah,
for
yeah.
her, I would think about that very differently in a coroner's court, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So please, if you're ever put in a
But what
situation
if
where you've got
you've
no
got
keys
that
or
fault?
alarms,
You
pardon?
can see that the ligature, but you can't get in.
Well, that's exactly
Yeah.
what's happening. Happening. It's not about just your safety; it's about other people's safety.
They got,
So-
they got me a key pretty quickly anyway.
Good,
They made
good.
one. They got,
Yeah.
one, they got one off Kirsty and they made me a little fob.
Good.
And then there you go, Dan. Thank you very much.
Good. Yeah.
Always come with me alarm.
Yeah.
I've had my own for years.
Okay.
I've always got an alarm at least.
Good. The Restraint Reduction Network, they do a lot of good work about debrief. It's a good algorithm to follow. You can Google this. We align it now with our PAC safety training. So it's just to know that if you're ever unsure what you need to capture in a debrief, this document kind of puts the meat on the bones for you. It's a bit of an easy read version. We do have a printed version, and I think we just used to have the link as well, but it is good if you are a senior member of staff that is expected to run a debrief. It's just there.
it's also good, like you say, for other people as well that are actually going to attend the debrief to know what they're actually going
What
to
to
happen.
There is a template as well on SharePoint. It gives you a debrief template as well, and staff aren't aware of that, but it's just, this is what we're kind of escalating in training. When I showed you that video from Alison Williams the other day, she said, we've had so many more referrals for assistance, help with trauma from staff. And I said, it's because we're talking about it. We're letting staff know that there is the resources there. We have Freedom to Speak Up Guardians and we have Freedom to Speak Up Ambassadors. Ambassadors are, it's like rungs of a ladder. If you have a concern, you're meant to escalate it to your manager. But say the incident involves your manager or somebody else senior and you don't want to do it. We have East and West Freedom to Speak Up ambassadors. I kind of cut out the middleman. I went straight to the Freedom to Speak Up Guardians. I went straight to Joanne Inman because I had staff coming here telling me, literally sat in the office crying with me saying I don't have keys, I don't have alarms, I don't feel kind of safe. So I captured all of that data and I went to her and said, this is a major problem.
So these
We've got a
people
major problem.
Not saying anything. These people not saying
They're
anything.
frightened too,
Yeah,
Dad.
yeah.
They're scared
There's
too.
more that are frightened,
They're
isn't
scared
there?
too. They're scared too. So I bypassed.
Or is this one at 7 o'clock they come round, can I have your keys for night? Yeah.
No,
when
no.
when
When I go out.
I always say, when I leave, yes.
Yeah, when I leave. I went straight to Jo Inman and I had a Teams meeting with her and I said staff are too scared to actually speak up because we do have cwp.raising.concerns. There's an address up there if you need it where you can escalate concerns, you know, if you feel that safety is being compromised. She was amazing. She was so good. She was so approachable. But there are rungs to the ladder. She did ask me, she just said, have you spoken to people, Freedom to Speak Up ambassadors? And I said, but people have told me that they've escalated this as a concern and it's not changing. So One of my colleagues, he didn't feel comfortable speaking to the Freedom to Speak Up ambassador on our side of the trust because lots of us are connected. So he went to the West, somebody he didn't know, who he felt was impartial. So, and she dealt with the issue, which was an issue we had on this side, but she dealt with it. And so you can do that. You can speak to anybody, but it's just knowing that they are there. Whistleblowing became like a big frowned upon thing, wasn't it? But they've tried to come away from that term now, and it's all about safety. It's all about how we feel safe. So it's just understanding that we do have Freedom to Speak Up Guardians and a Freedom to Speak Up team. Are you aware that we have that?
I'm now.
You are now. Also, we always talk about policies, don't we? There is a policy that is HR 19, and it's supporting staff involved in traumatic events at work, including incidents, complaints, claims and inquests. Are you aware of HR 19? It's one of those things, isn't it? If you need it, people don't know they're there. So it's just understanding that we do have systems in place, and we shouldn't be frightened to speak up. Yeah? It's okay if you're kind of that personality. I've always been able to speak up, but I get that other people aren't. Any questions? No? Sure? Right, so that is the PAT element done. If you can scan the QR codes for the final time for this session, and that's our evaluation. If you think in the evaluation, if you think of something that we could include in the training, if you think it's great, brilliant, tell us why you think it's great. If you think it's rubbish, tell us why you think it's rubbish as well. Because evaluation's not good when we're looking at it and it says, yes, it was great, but doesn't tell us why. It was rubbish, but it doesn't tell us why, because it should always be about learning. Thank you so much.
Early start, is it?